learned about Leila through her movie work. But I've learned since that the movies are a means to an end, and they come out of background in the think tank world and international relations, and really finding ways to tell the story about what's broken and what has to change, whether it is a documentary about Gorbachev and international relations, or the first movie that I saw, which was Urban Roots, about the urban farming movement in Detroit. And we actually threw a launch party for that film in at Keegan Ailes in Kingston, way back. So I've admired Lila's work and was delighted to meet her a couple years ago with her husband Matthew. And I think what I remember, I'm sure I'm exaggerating this, but my memory is that they were just making espressos like constantly for 2 hours. Um, and but I think you will find that I have managed to find a winner for a presenter who is, we stay fairly ahead of the curve, so she's ahead of our ahead. And I couldn't be more thrilled to introduce Leila Conners.
Thanks, Melissa. That was a very nice intro. Yeah, I don't think I have much more to add, but I'm happy to speak with you all today. And yeah, I will get through some slides that include some of the movie that I'm doing. Let's see. The movie that I'm doing now is addressing an emergent reality, whether people, want to know about it or not, or believe in it or not, or whatever it is happening. And it's an interesting reaction to the crisis that we all face in terms of rising temperatures and changing climate. So without further ado, I'm going to go into the screen share and talk you all through it via that. So let's see. All right. We all see the screen?
Yes.
Carbon dioxide removal. So I'm going to start differently than maybe some people would imagine, but I'm not sure if everyone saw this article, but 300-year-old sponges are telling us we've already passed 1.5 degrees. So I just thought that we need to just understand that. There's, a lot of discussion about where we are, what we are doing. But as far as from all the movies that I've done and all the people that I've spoken to, which has been 25 years of speaking with scientists, things are accelerating and have been accelerating far faster than everyone really quite grasps. But I thought this was an interesting way to tell that story, because they've been looking at sponges and it's already there. You guys probably have seen this image. 1.5 degrees is not theoretical for some people. The South Pacific actually, I don't know if you all remember, it was actually 2 degrees for a very long time. The goal was to stay under 2 degrees. And then this is Simon Kofi. He's from Tuvalu. It's the least visited country in the world. We're actually going to go there to film him. This is the last place I can go. He's just been running for president, so we've been waiting for him to win that or lose it or whatever. But he did this speech to the COP and basically said, listen, at 2 degrees, we're underwater. And this was a dramatic shot that he said. Not just them, but this is a shot from our movie. This is the Maasai, the Suswa Plains of Suswa in Kenya, which used to be a grass plain of tall grasses, and now it's just a bunch of dust devils. They've had a drought for 15 years. So all to say that we're here now. I remember when I did the 11th hour, in 2004, we started shooting that. And we were just wondering, like, what's the state of the planet, And is it going to be okay? And then climate, was happening. And we were just like, is it happening? Is it not, it's not only happening, it's going past pretty much every projection that we have. And that's just also, that's what's happening. You know, we're probably hitting 6 degrees. You know, things haven't scaled the way we needed to, but anyway, you guys know this, I'm sure. I just have to set this up in a specific way. So once the 1.5 degree, this says 2 still, but you can see 1.5 on this map and 2 degrees. 1.5 requires removals sooner rather than later. 2 degrees requires it later. But 2 degrees isn't acceptable to a large part of our planet. And so when we talk about, here's another nice graph about this. We need, obviously, greenhouse gas emission reductions. As we know, we haven't been doing that. We haven't been scaling it. We know we can. Mark Jacobson from Stanford has long had the Solutions Project and talks about it, and he has a plan for every state in the union and every country in the world. But, you know, we have war, we have other things going on. We're just not getting there. And to really let that sink in, we're not getting there. And so we need to start scaling something called removals, which up till now, people have been equating it to the gas and oil industry, which they do. They do carbon capture sequestration, they go carbon capture and reuse. They do a lot of those things, and everyone's inflamed and hate them for doing it. I understand why, but that's not what we're talking about here. So part of the problem that we're engaging in now is trying to help people understand what CDR is and what it isn't. And for some reason, okay, here we go. This is, I'm going to skip over. So trees. When people think about mitigating climate, and I call my company Tree Media, so I love trees. Trees are amazing. We need them. Biodiversity is very important. Where we are now too is carbon removal schemes that you've probably read about in The Guardian and other places where people are reselling tracts of Amazon and all of that. And everyone's like, carbon credits are a scam and all that, which in some cases they are, but that's what we call nature removals or short-term carbon cycle removals. So this is also not what I'll be talking about today. We do need trees. We obviously need biodiversity, but it is not going forward. Trees and soil. This is a shot from my movie in Australia. Soil, trees, what we call short-term carbon cycle is different. Human civilization has to understand the carbon cycle a whole lot better. Okay. And this is kind of a fun graph. There's a million of them online. I was like, oh, I'm going to grab one for this talk. But at the bottom, I want you all to look at fossil pool that says 10,000 years. That is what we're going to be talking about today. We are talking about the restoration of deep carbon pools. Carbon dioxide removal, or what we call additional removals, is about understanding that we destroyed deep carbon pools and we need to restore deep carbon pools. This is a conversation that it does not exist in the United States. It does exist in Europe and in actually other parts of the world, but so far I have not seen it actively discussed here. Hopefully our movie will help people start discussing it. When we talk about plants and soil, you'll see that it's a different cycle. It's what we call the short-term cycle. That has to actually be in place, obviously. But what we've done, as we all know, is we've taken the deep pools and shot them into the sky. And now we have to put them back. So how do we do that? There's a lot of different ways to do that. There's a lot of different pathways. And I'm just going to actually go to my next slide because I realize this is probably too complicated for right now. But the best way to understand it is we want to go into the lithosphere. We want to take the carbon that is in the atmosphere and put it back in the geosphere. We do not want it cycling amongst the ocean and the vegetation. That is happening anyway. It's 100 up, 100 down every year, right? What we're trying to do is take the excess carbon that we burn every year, which is in the excess of 30 to 40 gigatons a year, and put it back in the ground. And also hopefully get into what we call legacy carbon pools that are in the sky. So what we're talking, when we're talking about carbon dioxide removal, we are talking about additional removal pathways that the Earth doesn't do. So for example, if humans weren't around, this wouldn't happen, okay? So rocks obviously do it on their own, but they do it at geologic timescales. People are now interacting with rocks differently and doing it quicker with using rocks like basalt or peridotite. We have direct air capture, which is the boogeyman of CDR. Everyone looks at these machines and thinks they're oil companies. I'm here to tell you, I know the guys, they're not oil guys, they're engineers from Switzerland who like to ski. And they wanted to create, save the future for their children. And they do things with geothermal energy and turn stuff into rocks. Enhanced rock weathering is another pathway, biochar carbon removal, then sinking seaweed and microalgae. So I'll go through all these different pathways just to give you a sense of what's going on. I'm going to skip this because it's just another. This is a giant wall of basalt in Kenya in the Rift Valley. This is Corey. He's a young man who's working with the Maasai and different Kenyans to figure out what to do with the geothermal in the Rift Zone and the volcanic basalt rock formations. Because basically, Kenya can save the world probably 10 times over. The entire amount of industrial carbon that's in the sky could be removed and put under Kenya 10 times over. So using geothermal energy, and they have it all there. So everyone's kind of trying to figure out, what it'll take. The interesting thing when one talks about removals like that into rock, people get pretty upset in America about direct air capture taking energy away from underserved communities. Well, that's true. That would happen, let's say, in Brooklyn. But in Kenya, they actually need the demand because they don't have enough demand. They have so much geothermal energy, there's not enough demand to even use it, so they don't develop it. So in this case, direct air capture actually provides an off-taker for the geothermal energy. And so it's a triple win, plus it will provide jobs. So Kenya's looking at this Kenya's racing down the direct air capture route. And I don't really have any pictures of the people in my film in this movie. I have only a few people, but it's very, very diverse. I could actually play my trailer probably at the end, Melissa, if you want me to. I think that might actually be good to see the actual visual of who's doing this, because I think it's very inspiring. This is in Oman. This is a giant mountain range called the Hajar Mountains, and they are a giant mountain range of peridotite. And this rock actually sequesters carbon in real time. It actually doesn't even sequester carbon, it rips it apart and turns it into calcite. And so young Oman engineers are using solar direct air capture from solar, so capturing carbon from the sky using solar energy, and then putting it in the ground where the carbon is being ripped into calcite. This is the first borehole area where they put their first project. Going on to enhanced rock weathering, let's just see what I have. Yeah, I don't have much on enhanced rock weathering visually because it's mostly quarries. But these are two farmers in North Carolina who've applied basalt crushed rock. So for those of you who don't know, enhanced rock weathering. So basically, if you take rock that's carbon hungry and you crush it up and apply it to fields in the East Coast, for example, it's a replacement for lime. It changes the pH towards what one needs it gets rid of the acidity and it removes carbon. It does not get rid of any nutrients. It actually attracts nutrients to the soil. And then the carbon is then, when it rains, the carbon gets, drained off the soil into the streams and back into the ocean. And that's where the cliffs of Dover come from. So basically the crust of the earth is created by enhanced rock weathering. naturally, and not enhanced rock weathering, sorry. Enhanced rock weathering are people trying to figure out how to do it, work with farmers to apply it to their fields so that they become carbon removal centers. And several companies are basically paying farmers to apply basalt rock onto their land. And so it helps the farmers and it helps humanity, basically. And luckily for us, I mean, the rule is 50 miles. So all of this, and I'll talk about this later, but this is a very new industry, but the entire industry is talking a lot about MRV, monitoring, reporting, and verification. Obviously, they have to create standards. They have to, so the standards right now are over 1,000 years removed, obviously sequestering far more carbon than it uses, and permanently remove it. And there's other, parameters, but this is obviously not oil executives. Anyway, these two guys, another way to remove carbon is through seaweed. And Sargassum in the Caribbean, if anyone has gone there, floats, and it doesn't need to grow on anything, and it grows very abundantly. So it's a very carbon hungry plant. And so what they're going to be doing is basically growing it, cutting it, and baling it and sinking it. And what's interesting is before they sink it, they extract some of the oils from the plant. And she's testing it. This is a European Spanish oceanographer. And she basically envisions bioplastics and other, biodegradable materials from the actual oils from the Sargassum plant. And then the shell, once they extract the nutrients from it, they will sink this to, someone's in the waiting room, by the way, Evelina. They will sink in bales, and it'll say at the abyssal plain at the bottom of the sea for thousands and thousands of years. And if we ever need the carbon, we can always bring it back up. What's interesting about sea fields, and you can see they're trying to grow this, kind of contain the Sargassum here. What's interesting about is these two guys are from St. Vincent. It's a very poor island. And the guy on the left, his brother died from eating too much whale meat. I had no idea that the Caribbean whales, and it's because they're starving, they don't have that much food, and they're very poor. And so they are looking at this industry to employ them and others so that they stop whaling. So there's some really interesting side benefits. There's someone else in the waiting room, June Wallach, for some of these young companies. Biochar. Now, I know there's a heated debate about biochar in the Valley, and hopefully we'll get beyond that pretty quickly. This is bags of biochar made in Switzerland, and each bag is worth a ton of atmospheric carbon. Biochar is not incineration, it's pyrolysis. It's a different process. We're going to have to learn what that is very quickly, because biochar will be at the center of a lot of things, including materials creation, new bespoke kind of building materials, ways to deal with soil and feed for, livestock. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. In this case, this is a biochar it's what he calls a reverse energy plant. He's an Austrian inventor who basically is taking waste woody biomass, of course, never taking real trees, never. There's so much woody biomass in industrial civilization. We're landfilling it, basically. But taking woody biomass and turning it into char and syngas that powers energy, and these can go up to 8 megawatts. So we can envision in the valley with our ag waste creating energy and biochar for different villages. And they're not very big, these places. This is something very new. This just launched in California. This is actually a Bangladeshi scientist who created heirloom, which is it's limestone on trays. So remember when I talked earlier about applying it to fields? Well, they said, why don't we just apply crushed rock to trays? We have that much more surface area. So this carbon gets removed, and then the trays, there are these robots that go up and down, and this entire thing is on solar. And basically, they have an electric kiln that will heat the tray, and the carbon will be removed and put into concrete. At the moment, it's going into concrete. In the future, this kind of thing, it can go in the ground. And then it gets recycled. So it's like a sponge that gets wrung out and goes around and around and around. And they are going to go to gigaton scale. This entire industry is aiming to remove annual emissions. And when I went around the world, I did calculate that if all of this scales, which it will and it is, this industry will probably get to probably 20 to 30 gigatons in short order a year. This is, again, the boogeyman of the world. Everyone's seen this probably. Al Gore took a big whack at it. This is Climeworks director capture on geothermal. And I don't know why he said they were oil company guys, but they're not. They're, like I said, Swiss engineers who like to ski. And this machine uses what we call sorbent material. It's like what's in your athletic shoe, essentially. It captures carbon and it goes into the ground. This is Carbfix. This is an Icelandic company that had been doing this already. They had been, fixing carbon underground. And what they were fixing was their industrial emissions, like aluminum smelters and things like that, which, by the way, will never be electric. So we're going to have to figure out how to sequester that stuff. I'd rather capture it at source, because at parts per million, it's like, almost 99 parts per million at the stack. When it goes up in the atmosphere, it's 400 parts per million. So sorry, like 999,000. The point is, the concentration off a stack is so much easier to capture it there than letting it go up in the atmosphere and then trying to suck it out later. The energy required is quite a lot if you're using machines. This is the location where it goes underground in Iceland. Carbfix is the company run by a bunch of women engineers. The other interesting process, and I think this is the last one, that I have right now, and then I'll show my trailer, is one really fascinating. This is a guy out of London in Morocco. So a bunch of Moroccan engineers. But basically, it's microalgae. And now a lot of people were worried about the ocean. He's like, fine, I'll just pump it on land and grow the algae. And then what he's doing is doing the same thing that the macroalgae people are doing, is extracting really high value products like beta carotene, magnetic sand, like all sorts of incredible products. So effectively, this entire industry is going to disrupt not only, it's going to disrupt the chemical business. It's going to disrupt actually the fossil fuel business, because I haven't even gotten into carbon capture and utilization, which is, wouldn't you rather, if you had to drive something that needed an oil of some kind, use it from recycle it rather than dig up new things, new carbon from the ground, old carbon? That's a whole nother conversation we can have after this call. I can go very much into that. But anyway, this algae project is basically going to be creating materials using algae, and then algae does capture carbon, and that part is in the body and the structure of the algae that then gets dried out on the desert floor. This is in a very remote part of the Sahara. It's in Western Sahara. And they're basically putting it in the Saharan sands and just basically burying it above like future ocean rise and whatever. That's going to be like, this project alone is probably going to get to like 5 gigatons on its own. Not this one, but if you scale it across the world, it's going to do massive amounts of removals. That's sort of like what it looks like from up in the space there.
Thank you, Leila. There have been a lot of questions in the chat, but let me open it up to the people in the audience. If you raise your hand, we will call on you. John?
I want to make one statement before we dive in. pretty much all the people that you saw are PhDs or chemical engineers or young people that have took environmental degrees. So before we launch into like seeing is there plastic bags or whatever, they know more about end cycle to cycle, end to end, you know, total carbon, total energy embodiment than all of us on this call together. You know what I mean? Like that part is, you know, none of this is, you know, they've already thought of pretty much all of that, but I can try to answer those questions if you want. And no, those weren't plastic.
Yeah, so I have a question about the basalt that you were talking about, spreading it on fields.
Yep.
Is that what you were saying? Does that suck in carbon dioxide into the basalt? Is that what you're saying on that?
Yes. It reacts with the soil and brings more nutrients into the soil, takes the carbon away.
And how does that put that back into the way underground forever?
Because that's how the earth does it anyway. So the earth does that. The geologic carbon cycle involves rocks weathering and capturing carbon and going into the stream. Like first they're in the soil, and eventually it ends up in the ocean and on the ocean floor and becomes the earth's crust. It's like 100 million year cycle. And in some cases it's 100 years if it's that exposed mountain range. And so it depends on where it is in the world. But in this case, when you apply it to North Carolina or up here in the Hudson Valley, when it rains, it'll take the captured carbon on the basalt and literally wash it into the ocean.
Wow. And you said something about limestone. Does it do the same thing? Does limestone do the same thing?
Limestone crushed up. Now, what they are doing is taking rocks. So let's just, and broadly, because I am not a chemical engineer, but what they're doing is taking what we call carbon hungry rocks, crushing them up, and applying them to soils. And in some cases, they give them what you call superpowers, which is simply chemical engineering, which isn't chemicals, but it's other rocks, it's other relationships that literally attract carbon to the material and then removes it from the atmosphere and brings it back into what we call the lithosphere or the geosphere. So whether or not you're doing it on those trays, and the reason why they're doing it on those trays is because obviously there's more surface area. You know, so an heirloom plant, as we would call it, is just a lot of crushed rocks on trays. And so it can, you know, do a ton more than one field. But what's nice about the field version is, especially for the Hudson Valley, is that it's a replacement for lime that farmers have to pay for, and it's mined. So you don't have to do that anymore. You know? You can take, well, in the case of the Irish guy who was in the trailer, he's taking waste concrete and actually concrete from demolished buildings and obviously making sure it doesn't have bad things in it. And if it does, remove it and then put it on farmland, which I find fascinating. And in the case of in North Carolina, in Bootner, North Carolina, there's these giant, so basalt is often a waste stream rock that isn't used. Like, for example, the quarry we went to, it's a place that mines for, I didn't know this, but for railroads. Did you know that all the rocks on the railroads have to be replaced all the time? So they have to continually mine to maintain our railroads. These are the things also that I think I count myself as an environmentalist. And I used to, you know, we just don't know how the world works. And often, you know, like I had no idea that you had to keep reapplying rocks on railroads, right? Anyway, in the process of doing that, there's a huge pile of a mountain the size of the Empire State Building that goes on for miles of this basalt that just they didn't need. And so that's actually what Mary, the Asian woman, is using to apply to farmers, you know, lands to remove carbon. And she's already done, you know, thousands and thousands of tons of carbon. And she just recently got $60 million to further pilot what this is. But enhanced rock weathering is going to be a very, very powerful tool that we have, and is coming to the Hudson Valley. I know that she's going to come up here with that.
One
And in
quick
fact, and I would say that Yale just applied on, I met Hawthorne Valley, kids at Hawthorne Valley. Yale, the environmental program, just applied basalt to Hawthorne Valley, a plot on Hawthorne Valley's farm, just last month. So
Okay,
we're
one
waiting
quick
to see.
follow-up question. I know other people have some. Does the rock eventually fill up with carbon and stop absorbing it?
Yes, yes,
How
it
long does
does.
that take?
There's MRV on that, and it depends on what kind of superpowers it is and where it's actually applied. And that's part of the work right now, is to understand under what conditions, under what location. And that's what's so exciting about it, because they're learning more and more every day. You have to understand that even though scientists have known this for a very long time, this entire industry really got started in earnest in, I would say, 2017, 2018, 2019. It's a very young and filled with young, pretty much everyone I met was probably 30, like mid 30s. You're very young people.
Thanks.
But do I have to choose?
And,
Oh, okay.
Anne, you have a question?
Go ahead. Sorry. I'll.
And you're muted.
Yeah, hi. I would like to know about those bags that the biochar is bagged in. What are those bags made of? Do you know?
No, it wasn't plastic. It's some sort of like, not, what is it? It's not hay, but it's like a grass of some kind.
Some kind of some kind of biodegradable material.
Yeah, I don't know. You can ask them.
Ask whom?
You
Who
can
else?
call Braunfeld in Switzerland. Just give them a call and see if they're using plastic bags.
Brownfeld?
Yeah, I'll text you the location.
Okay, that'd be great. Although, how are you going to text me? You don't have my phone number.
I'll
Send
put
it
it
to
in
me,
chat.
send it to me or to Third Thursday and I'll forward it on to Ann.
Yeah.
Okay.
Other questions? There was a lively chat. There's a lot of questions about the technology. So obviously energy is a big issue here, and you mentioned in a lot of cases they're looking at either geothermal or solar. But there's also the costs. Have these folks run the numbers? I mean, engineers are notoriously bad at being businessmen.
Yes, they have. And the scale of this, put it this way, without it, here's the thing. Most of Shashank, who is the Bangladeshi guy, and I'll answer this in a long way, said that, carbon removal is not something that they all were born to want to do. We need it to live. I mean, it's one of those things, like, it's like trash removal. They're starting to look at this like a utility, because it's not whether or not we can decide to do this. And renewable energy is not going to get us there. Just everyone needs to let that sink in. And that's why I started with the 300-year-old coral, saying we've hit 1.5. I love renewables. I've been messaging on climate for 25 years. We have not done what we needed to do. So whether or not we like it or not, we have to do this. And if we don't, we're going to see some very bad outcomes in a very short period of time. And the thing about the carbon removal industry is that, as to get to that graphic that I showed you, it needs to scale 40% year on year starting now. And if, let's just say, renewables don't scale, they have to scale 70% year on year, which is not possible. And the solar industry did not scale 40% year on year. So in terms of the market, there is a voluntary carbon removal market. Now, let's be clear, this is not the forests, okay? The biodiversity market is different. They have nothing to do with it. This is what we call additional removals. So companies like Microsoft, companies like Stripe and Shopify and many others have now done net zero targets, not for just their yearly, but for the entire time that they've been in operation. So Microsoft is going to remove every carbon molecule that they've emitted since the mid-70s. And they've done the calculations and they want to buy those removals. The interesting thing is that there's not enough removals. So there's a fund that's been created called the Frontier Fund, which is now, I think, committed up to $60 billion to seed some of this technology. And so you did say that the engineers are not businessmen. Well, let me tell you, the business and the VCs and everyone is crawling all over this space. There's going to be a massive amount of money, and a lot of money already is being deployed in the space so that it scales. And I want to remind everybody that it's not just machines. So when everyone thinks about carbon removals, they're thinking about Climeworks' machine in Iceland. Remember, you've got sargassum, you've got microalgae. There's a lot of other pathways that are going on here that don't require energy at all. I mean, sure, yeah, you're going to take your boat out, but I mean, the MRV that Melissa mentioned in the chat is highly active. So the Grantham Foundation has funded, hold on a second, the Grantham Foundation has funded a group to figure out the standards, to figure out the different pathways to the third decimal degree in terms of energy embodiment, in terms of energy usage, in terms of carbon usage, to do what they're doing, to make sure that there is a massive net removal with all of these different things. So the market is coming together. The price per ton of carbon they want to set at the cost of its removal. Okay, so which is really interesting. So it makes it more of a utility than like a like a stock, that people have been sort of looking at. It's not a trading scheme either. So it's not a permission to pollute either, right? Because the permission to pollute regime is over here. It's like when Exxon is emitting X over here, and then someone wants to emit over there, then they do a trade. This is not that. This is removals, permanent removals. So
what's the time frame for this to actually have a significant effect on carbon?
Well, the scaling, like I said, is dramatic, and they want to have good models and good sort of globally accepted pathways that everyone on this call would understand by 2030. And by 2050, and if I go back to hold on, let's look when they say. It's by 2050, we want to have a fully functioning market. And hold on, let me show you.
25 years.
Yeah.
Are they going to be able to catch up?
Well, I mean, that's why we're doing this movie, because we need people to get on side rather than try to ban biochar and direct air capture. What we're trying to say is, hey, wait a second, guys, can we have a discussion? Because this graph is real. We are not getting there. We'd love to have, the remaining carbon budget. We are out of our carbon budget by 2050. We need to have removals. Well, see how it is 2030 that it starts coming online, right? And this is not even just restoration. This is just getting our per year emissions to zero, much less dealing with existing problems that we have today. Right?
Penny has her hand up. Penny? You're muted. Penny, unmute yourself.
Is that good?
Yes.
Okay. I had two questions that are sort of similar. It's like, what's the residue from burning biochar? And what does burying the algae in the sand do to the sand? I mean, does
Well,
it change it
yeah,
significantly or?
yeah, so let's get into externalities, which is what your question's about. We're living in a world in which the externalities are going to kill off everything we understand that's larger than a cat within probably 50 to 100 years, right? So the externalities of current industrial civilization is catastrophic. So there is going to be some usage. For example, when you sink, I'll start with a sargassum. When you sink algae in the abyssal plain, this is not by the hydrothermal vents. It's basically a desert. Are there some starfish at the bottom of the ocean? Yes. Right? Are these bales going to hurt those entities? Probably not. They have to do some research, but on the whole, it's fine. It's like planting a tree, or, there's another, I didn't talk about it. It's called ocean alkalinity enhancement, where you can put alkalinity into the ocean, and it's not iron fertilization, it's alkalinity, and it deacidifies the ocean, and it basically adds some salt, which already has been lost. So sometimes it depends on the pathway. I'm working my way up to biochar. Biochar is, the biochar is very much misunderstood in America because Americans have not invented good biochar machines. So everyone understands biochar to be the guy in the backyard burning something in a kiln and seeing, smoke escaping and whatever. The Germans and the Austrians have invented new machines that have zero emissions, and it's pyrolysis. It doesn't have emissions at all. So that is not a concern of anyone. It doesn't, and it's so complex that we're actually doing a whole other movie on biochar called The Biochar Effect, because it's probably one of the most misunderstood substances on the planet right now, and probably the thing that will save us, because the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, has said that biochar will have to scale to 9% to 10% of the removals on that graph will have to be done by biochar. So biochar, whether or not New York decides to ban it, whether Glens Falls bans it for whatever good reason they have because of the trucks or whatever happens, biochar will scale massively everywhere else in the world. And so it will become a very popular way to make materials to help, like I said, with livestock, to help with the quality of soil. It actually becomes a sponge in the soil and helps soil become resilient, especially to look at our winter. So biochar it's a very interesting thing. In some cases, depending on what you're charring. So we were in the Philippines. Now, just so you know, there's a whole community of women in Cambodia that are doing biochar right now. There's the Philippines are going crazy with biochar. They're taking rice husks and making very strong silicate-based biochar. And what's interesting about all of that is that no one really knows actually all the things that it can actually do. But in the case of the Austrian, the pyrolysis has something called a syngas, which they put into generating energy. Now, none of this is causing any emissions. So one thing that everyone has to understand is pyrolysis is not incineration. It's not the same thing. So it is not an emissions activity. And especially when you're looking at a Pyreg machine or the Syncraft machine that's in our movie, they're capturing the energy and putting it through an electric generator. So for example, like I said, you can take woody biomass that would have ended up in a landfill and become methane producing, put it in a biochar machine and actually power Chatham. You know what I mean? And then with the biochar, he makes a joke. He says, we have a reverse power plant where we're not burning coal, we're making coal, which is the biochar. And you take the biochar and you apply it to the soil, or you put it in concrete, make it lighter and stronger and all those sorts of things. In Chatham, there's a small company called Marvel Dynamics that's going to take biochar and put it into different forms concrete forms, you know, there people put it on floors, you know, you use it for floors, you use it to make your countertops or a bench or whatever. If you put biochar in it, it's lighter and stronger. How much stronger and lighter? They have to test it. So a lot of this is very new. And what was the other process you wanted to know about the residue, the microalgae in the sand? Well, it's in the Western Sahara. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the area, but it is very arid and there's not a lot, and they're burying it underground. So it's like there's this cliff and they're putting it in the cliff. So I don't know how to answer how it's going to affect it, but I think the carbon is better served to be there than in the atmosphere, given what it's doing to everything.
Can I ask one other quick question? I heard something on Volts about the company in Australia that's putting adding carbon to cement, and the result is a stronger cement than Pittsburgh cement, which is what's been being used. And I
Could be. I don't know. Sorry.
know about that.
I don't, but that cement will be the, I mean, again, the world uses cement to build still. We all know that we're trying to use different materials, right? We all understand this very well. The filler can be biochar, right? I don't know when they say we're putting carbon in it, I have no idea what form of carbon they're putting in. Like you can put actually just straight up carbon in there. You can pyrolyze materials and put it in. So I don't know. I also know, just so you know, like biochar is a circular product in the sense that it creates the idea of circularity. Remember when I said we have to really understand the carbon cycle, and I've put up that civilization has to learn how to live inside the carbon cycle, and biochar is going to help us do that. It's not the only thing that's going to do that, but it's going to be one of the things we use. Now, for example, you can pyrolyze waste. Biochar also pyrolyzes PFAS. It can actually take care of brownfields. You can actually pyrolyze manure and create a very high value compost. You can also pyrolyze tires. So all the tire dumps can be pyrolyzed, and it's actually a different word. They're calling it a synchar. So synchar is different than biochar. You can actually start taking, so basically biochar is going to be probably how we get rid of so much industrial waste that's sitting around. I'm highly aware of mushrooms and bacteria as well. So I'm deep into decomposition with bacteria. It's a different movie. Deep into the mushroom stuff. But biochar is going to be, pyrolysis is definitely going to be one of the tools we're going to be using.
Can I jump in with a geek point? Pyrolysis
Sure.
is the process of heating organic materials in the absence of oxygen to high temperature. So you don't get carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide, which you would get from burning, but you get
Right.
a mish of various organic compounds.
Yeah, and you recover those and use them to good use. You put them to good use. And so the yeah, it's basically the opposite of incineration.
What's the energy that you use to do that?
So basically there's different machines, and it's kind of like an infinite cycle. So you use woody biomass, right? Waste biomass, which there's a woman named Kathleen Draper who's awesome, who lives in New York in the Finger Lakes. And she is a big proponent of biochar. She can answer all your questions. You should invite her on here. She's amazing, but she's calculated the thousands and thousands of tons of waste wood in New York State that can be used for pyrolysis. There is so much waste wood, we don't know what to do with up to our ears in it. So that's what you use. And in some cases, like there was one guy in Australia that has a lava machine. It's really interesting. And I wasn't there. My husband filmed that. But basically, it's very hot sand. And it somehow it's self-sustaining. And I don't understand how that is, but apparently it is somehow. I think with the material that goes in it, it starts this loop continually by what you're putting through it. And, you know, you can go to Pyreg, Pyreg. That's a German company that does the Pyreg machines, which are, I think, industry standard, the highest quality machine you can get. You can also, you know, build one yourself, but we don't, for now, America really is not spending a lot of time building biochar machines because right now we're trying to keep it legal. So,
Yeah, I actually have a factoid that I think I can spit out coherently that is related to this, which is that there is a Pyreg machine in California that they got permitted in like the strictest air quality area in the country, because unlike like the one in Glens Falls that everybody's all flipped out about does leave small residues of things like PFAS if you're pyrolyzing garbage, but the Pyreg doesn't, and
exactly.
they got that through like the most rigorous permitting process.
By the way, and speaking of that, like the people that you saw on screen are so aware that if they mess up, people like yourselves will crucify them, you know, and for good reason, because everyone doesn't want things to go badly. You guys have lived through a lot of bad news. You know what I mean? It's been bad. Things have gotten worse year on year. I know this, okay? I've been around a little bit too, right? So these people like Claire, who is the woman in the flower dress, she's doing the removals in Kenya, where she's trying to understand how to do the rock and how fast it becomes rock and all the questions you're asking, right? And the pressure this is on this girl, because first of all, if she figures this out properly, she basically helps save civilization. And if she messes up, you know, she's in big trouble. She's not going to mess up because she figured it out, right? But she also knows that if there's one shred of like a plastic bag in the shot, or if there's like, you know, whatever, like that someone's going to go, oh, but look at that. She knows, and they all know it's over, right? Because everyone is, you know, and by the way, you know, for all of us who absolutely adore solar, let's talk about the solar footprint, okay? Let's talk about the heavy metals required to make a solar panel. For some reason, solar and wind have a free lunch when it comes to materials usage. So, you know, let's compare apples to apples, right? When we are talking about implementation, let's talk about it. Let's talk about the materials required to do certain things. So I'm not saying don't do solar and wind. What I'm saying is we need to use materials to make the world, okay? It's not air. You know, just because carbon is a gas doesn't mean it takes a gas to get rid of it. We do need to build infrastructure. It's going to be energy embodied. It's going to use some things, but overall, it's a net removal, right? Overall, it's what we call bending the carbon curve. And right now, I'd like to say, and it's unfortunate, but I think the biggest obstacle to solving climate are environmentalists. Because the people that are the most against what I think will be the only thing that saves us are people who've been fighting the good fight for a really long time. And I'm basically gotten to a point where, and Melissa knows, like, I'm here to tell you all, we've got to look into this and do your own research. Don't take me like, you know, go ahead and look into all the companies. Go, you know, Melissa is providing through Sustainable Hudson all the links required. But at the end of the day, there's a couple of things that are going to happen. Places like Kenya don't have this conversation. When I go to Europe and I go to different places like Liechtenstein, and I talk to the people who are funding some of this stuff and say, you know, in America, they're trying to ban biochar. And they look at each other like I just came from the moon. You know, they don't even understand us at all. Like they don't understand. So I'm here to tell us all that we really need to look into this. We really have to really look into it because we're going to fall behind. And when it comes to innovation, jobs, money, all this stuff, This is on. This is all happening, and people are making choices as to where they're going to found their companies. And I've been saying to the Hudson Valley, I said, listen, I'm in Chatham. I'm looking at people that don't have jobs. You can have a vibrant economy here with renewable energy and carbon removal, you know, but we have to get out of our own way, basically.
Actually, could
Eric,
I chime?
wait a minute, Eric Zeiss had his hand up a long time ago, and I don't know if he's still here or if he still has a question.
It's probably too technical, but I was just wondering if were the various techniques that you had summarized, whether you have any idea of what the sort of end-to-end carbon footprint is. There's a lot of energy that is necessary to get things to the point where you can start to capture the carbon, and then you capture
Yes.
the carbon. So what's the end-to-end result?
Well,
Some
there's
of
a
these
man
are sort of marginal.
Well, I can tell you who to ask. Peter Miner has founded a whole company called Icarus. Okay. And Icarus is to the third decimal point going to answer your question. So each one, suffice it to say, each one is a net removal, including the energy. So Icarus is going to basically analyze every pathway to such a degree that that question that you just asked me will be answered. I can't answer it because only one that would know is Climeworks, which is a machine. But remember, we're doing ERW. Now, there's a guy named Dirk Pessler in Germany near Munich who's doing MRV for enhanced rock weathering. So all those companies like Lithos and Silicate and Ion and all the myriad companies that are doing ERW are sending Dirk their samples so that he has like what he calls a robot army that's in my movie. I'll show you. That's measuring your question. You know, so there's a lot of people right now working to answer that question very specifically for each of these pathways. And the interesting thing about direct air capture, you know, the machines, is that the sorbent material, so the material that's actually capturing the carbon, is getting better every year. So just like solar was whenever ago, the CDR, the DAC side of things, they are spending, you know, most of their investment money that they're getting into efficiencies, sorbent materials, things that can capture the carbon for less energy. Again, no one's expecting or asking to deploy DAC, direct air capture, in an energy hungry place like New York City or anything like that. Everyone's looking at geothermal zones with basalt rock formations underneath. And there are, you know, malignant actors that you'll probably read about. So remember, I'm not here to say that these people walk on, you know, like everyone that's doing CDR is, you know, white as the driven snow. What I am saying is that they've been cast as oil executives, which is absolutely criminal because it's not true. And in fact, there's letters going out from lawyers, you know, addressing that because it's not true. They're not oil executives. So, you know, and that was just the weirdest thing that Gore did. I have no idea why he did that because it was a very bad move. But basically, when we're talking about this pathway, there are going to be some people that aren't as good at it, which is why they're going to have MRV. So effectively, it's like organic products. You know, if you're going to go buy a banana, is it organic or not? You know, who registered it? What registry was it? Is it really organic? What was the same thing. You know, it's going to be like, are you going to do removals? And let me just introduce another concept. We have this whole thing, you know, called CCU, which is not what my movie's about. And a lot of these companies aren't doing, but there are companies that are going to take it from the sky and make fuel out of it. Now, ask yourself the question, would you rather have a plane flying on, you know, fuel that came from the sky or from the ground? So I don't know, right? So there's a guy who invented a machine that can actually, with solar energy in your garage, you can fuel up your car. So imagine a world in which there's no need to go dig up anything because you can just fuel your car in your garage. It's called Aircella. They're based in Rochester, New York. Now, Dimensional Energy is run by a guy named Jason Salfi, funded by the Seneca, actually. He used to work for NYSERDA and was at Cornell. He's doing jet fuel from solar, using the carbon and creating jet fuel. Now, do we want that? No, we want to all be on electric cars or, you know, levitate or something, but some things are never going to get off of oil, right? So, or maybe they will, but not in the time frame. Again, if I can show, the sponge says we're already at 1.5. So at this point where I'm sit is I would rather fuel civilization with recycled fuels, obviously, until we get off them, you know, and I do think we should do CCS, which is also, you know, crucify me now, but I really do think that oil companies should capture their carbon. Why not? Like, why shouldn't they? Now, obviously, what are they doing with it? That's another thing, and we can't trust them and all of that sort of thing. We understand that. However, as you said, Eric, the energy that required to take the 400 ping pong balls of a million ping pong balls out of the sky is a lot more energy intensive when it's that dilute. When it's that concentrated, it has far less energy. So why don't we do that? Why aren't we rushing to cover every stack we can?
They lose profit.
Todd
Yep.
Anderson has his hand up. Todd?
One other thing I'd like to at least mention is in the workflow of MRV, the auditing piece of that is at this point pretty expensive, and it's only at large scales that you can actually manage to collect carbon credits. So there's a lot of work necessary to democratize the MRV process itself. So it's possible to measure scaled down processes rather than only the largest things.
I mean, maybe. What I've understood from MRV right now is that there's a lot of companies in the space, right? So, and each pathway is going to have their own MRV groups, right, that are going to be measuring it. The other thing that emerged is the standard stuff, right? Because obviously you can do the monitoring, reporting, and verification, but at what standard? And we don't even have those yet. So that's what Anu, so did you see the two women in my trailer? One was veiled and one was from Bangladesh also. Anu has been tasked to hire a team, you know, that's her company is called Sidecar. And it was just founded like 2 months ago, is to create those standards. And so what's really interesting, and you guys should all get involved if you're interested. I mean, you can go on to Air Miners, you can go on to Open Air, What is CDR podcast, and Melissa has all these links. You can join in because this is a highly transparent group of people. So if you want to get involved with standards or get involved with price per ton of carbon or whatever you want to, you know, voice your opinion, join Air Miners, because Air Miners is the industry group. There's other ones in Europe, also in Asia, you know, so, and they have a cocktail. So if you want to get mad at the direct air capture people, you can go see them. They're going to have a cocktail party in New York, like at the end of February. You're taking all our energy.
Oh, I want to go. Can I chime in just one thing before we lose any more people? And that is, you know, so Sustainable Hudson Valley tries to at least know who to talk to on all these technologies, even if we don't know all the tech ourselves, and to, you know, support conversations like this. And we've discovered a group that has figured out kind of a way to help communities climb the learning curve, and be involved in approving demonstration projects. And they are the Four Corners Carbon Coalition. The Four Corners are Salt Lake City, Flagstaff, Santa Fe, and Boulder County in the Southwest. And they got the sustainability offices of those entities came together and actually found a little money and put it down to de-risk and do demonstrations, like, you know, some plots of, I think they're doing it in building materials in the built environment, but they did some fundraising. But they pulled together a kind of a review group from local government and from local universities to say, we will look at the proposals and approve what is being demonstrated, and we will keep track of this stuff and be part of educating the public on what works or what may not work. And so we've been talking with these folks, and they've been a little bit mentoring our team on, you know, how they have set that up. And we've thought that in the Hudson Valley, working with working lands and soils and biochar and enhanced rock weathering, potentially building materials, that would be, there's a nexus there. So we are, you know, unless somebody stops us, we are going to be putting out a request for information, which is basically, you know, if you're doing anything in this space, tell us. If you're an investor, if you're a property owner who might want to host a demonstration project, if you're whatever. And we are, you know, going to raise a modest budget if needed. Some of these things, as Leila was saying, you know, site owners can get paid to do it, but we're going to try to help some demonstration projects to happen and to be publicly very visible from the beginning in one or more communities, so that people can be, you know, it's not just a one shot asking the questions, it's an ongoing public conversation.
It's very involved. I think, again, it's one of those things. I think all the kids that are the engineers in this, and I've talked to all of them, obviously, for the film, you know, they'd rather be doing something else. Trust me. I mean, it's not like that's something they imagine they would be doing when they were born, for sure.
Todd Anderson has patiently had his hand up for a while. And so, Todd, I think you're muted.
I just unmute. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're faint. Talk louder.
I'm faint. Oh,
Mm.
well, yeah, is that better?
That's better.
All right. So when we moved here, this house was entirely heated with a wood stove. We spent a great deal of money insulating it, and we just bought 3 heat pumps, but we still like to burn the wood stove. Is there anything we can do, or is there any? I understand wood stoves are not good. Is that correct?
I mean, you know, I love, you know, burning wood in a fireplace or a campfire. You know, I live in an old house, and we used to have a wood burning furnace too, and it was just taken out. I don't know the answer to that anymore. I mean, here's the thing. I think we're going to get to a place. Let's just say everyone gets along and we scale renewable energy and CDR properly. Because, by the way, guys, let's understand this. And I'll get back to wood burning stove in a minute. But if we don't do this, guess what's next is geoengineering, like full on. This is what's scaring me. You know, Michael Mann and James Hansen just got in a huge argument about geoengineering. Like, they want to hit the sky. I think it was Hansen is so freaked out at how bad it is. He's, you know, the NASA guy that quit, you know, to be a climate activist. I mean, he wants to hit the lower atmosphere with stuff, you know. So if, in my view, that's bad. Like that, I don't think we go there, you know. So, but what I'm saying is, if we can get our annual emissions under control and start getting back into the legacy carbon, then you'll be able to do some of these things again, you know, and maybe the filters are better or that, but it's definitely not biochar, you know, because it has oxygen involved. And I don't know if there will be like a biochar machine you can use to fuel your home. But what I do know is that there's a guy, they just had the biochar conference in Sacramento, and there is a company doing small biochar machines that can take to farms. Because part of the problem is with biochar is the feedstock, like where is it, right? And so, you know, like in the Hudson Valley, we have a lot of pit, you know, farms that have pit fruits, or, you know, apple trees that get, you know, uprooted and burned or whatever. You know, you can char those, but you don't need a full biochar machine all the time, right? So, long-winded way to say, I don't know what to do about the wood burning furnace. It's definitely not biochar. But, you know, they are working on smaller biochar machines. Who knows what they'll come up with.
And catalytic converters help in dealing with the effluent, both in trying to reduce the particulate amount and also to at least capture some of the nitrous oxides.
Mhm.
Hello.
So what was the answer about the wood stove? I didn't understand.
The answer is it's not, it's incineration. Yeah.
What? I can't hear you.
You're not coming through clearly.
I'm
Me?
sorry.
No, Mark Varon.
Me?
I don't know who was in there. The problem with
just didn't-
wood
I didn't-
stove is the particulates and the pollutants that come out. I mean, wood's a renewable resource. But there are advanced stoves, as Eric mentioned, that will take out some of these pollutants.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
I like Eric's bookshelf. That's really nice.
I have
It's my memory.
I have a question. You've mentioned that the most effective place to do this technology is at the end of the smokestack, basically where the CO2 is coming out, or I guess methane would be the next thing. Yet a
Yeah.
lot of the places you are looking at are third world nations that are far away from. You were in Kenya, you were looking in the Caribbean, and you said it wouldn't work in New York, yet a city like New York is a huge problem.
Yeah, no, let me explain why. So I was just saying that my film is not about what we call carbon capture and storage, or CCS. This whole world, by the way, gives birth to an acronym like every day. It's unbelievable. So, but anyway, so CCS, carbon capture and storage, is the smokestack capturing thing. It's also what everyone thinks direct air capture is. It's like and that's what the oil companies do. And that's what Biden actually greenlit in his Infrastructure Act, is a huge CCS thing in Texas, right? The other one is with Climeworks in Louisiana, and that's actually carbon capture and storage. Carbon removal, CDR, right? So there's a cycle version and then there's a removals version, both of which are better than what we have now, right? So there's a lot of like conflating of these different carbon, also when someone says carbon market, like, are we talking about the permission to pollute market? Are we talking about the voluntary removals market? Are we talking about the biodiversity forest market? Like, what market are we talking about, right? So that's all I'm here to tell. I guess the big takeaway, I'm having to keep talking about it, but is, there's different markets now. There's different pathways for carbon. We live in a carbon cycle. It's very complex. And so young people, and the reason why I was in the third world, or not that that's not what it's, the global South, is that's where it's happening. They're doing it there. I'm not going to like Tennessee or wherever. They're not doing it there. It's the Kenyans, and the Kenyans happen to have the Rift Valley, and they happen to have all that geothermal, and they have the basalt. They have it all there. We have some places in the United States that have the same setup, but the Rift Valley is just in orders of magnitude giant. And it also has a lot of people that need jobs, in the sense of like, and there's a lot of people that don't need the electricity. So, in America, there's a big, discussion around this activity and justice, this idea that if you use energy to remove carbon, that's an unjust act. And they might be right. They might be right that in this case, the solar should go to heat a home, right? Emissions reduction first. However, in places like Kenya, they don't have the demand. They don't have development the way we have it. So it's a different consideration, which is why the movie ended up in these places, because it's where it's happening. In New York, nothing's happening in this space. We're thinking of suggesting small biochar machines for like the Empire State Building, because you could char the waste, or like Charm Industrial is thinking about doing I think there's some direct air capture they want to do on rooftops. There's already a company that's capturing emissions from trucks. And in fact, Dimensional Energy is using the carbon from this one company, I don't know the name, but they're capturing it from trucks. So the trucks are capturing their own emissions. And why that isn't like front page news, I don't know, because that's amazing.
Well, it sounds like you need to come back in 2 years and update us. This is fascinating. We are coming up on 8 o'clock. Unless there are some desperate questions, I want to thank our speaker for a really, I was down on this technology and now I have a lot to look into. So I'm glad you've opened our eyes to it. And I want to thank you for a fascinating conversation.
Well, thanks for
Yeah,
putting up with
great.
my intense approach. But it's like it's quite something else working on this, I have to tell you. And I've come a long way too, right? I mean, I was solar only, like, and I love solar, yes, but like, it's like when you have the sinking of a ship, and you have a hole in the ship and the ship's taking on water, right? In the case of renewable, if we use this metaphor, renewable energies is patching the hole in the ship, right? You don't want to take on any more. But we're at the point where if you patch the hole, the boat is still going to sink, right? So we have to bucket out the boat so it floats. That's where we are. And so that's why these people have risen up. And that's why we call it Legion 44, because it literally is this spontaneous eruption of young engineers around the world that are like, F it. We're just going to take it out of the sky. And market or not, scale or not, we're going to go down fighting. And that's how they feel. Because they're at the beginning of their lives and they don't want to do nothing, and that's what they're going to do. They're going to bucket it out until, and if there's a market, great. If there isn't, whatever, but at least they tried. That's what they're doing.
Yep. We need to
Wow,
do all
thank you
of the
so
above.
much.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.